Let's say you spend hours and hours creating a work of art and you're really proud of it. If it was totally up to you, you'd want that artwork to last forever, right? Or at least for a few weeks? I'm sure the last thing you'd want is for all your hard work to disappear in a puff of smoke. Yet that's kinda what happens when you use certain art supplies, like alcohol markers. Making art with alcohol markers is so incredibly popular these days. But the thing that no one really talks about much is that your alcohol marker art will fade over time. And the price of the marker doesn't even matter, whether it's cheap or expensive. Because even expensive brands like Copic will fade. To illustrate, here are some swatches from a Copic color chart I filled in 2.5 years ago. On the left is how the colors looked originally. On the right is how the colors look now. Notice how much these colors have faded, so now they appear much lighter. Here's another group of swatches. On the left are the original colors, and on the right you can see how these same colors experienced a hue shift. Now check out this artwork that I made 6 years ago using Copic markers. Here's how it looked originally, and here's how it looks now. It's kinda crazy to see how much that background color has changed. One more example is this groovy poodle I colored just 3 years ago using Artex alcohol markers. Here's how it looked originally, and here's how it looks now. The colors are so much weaker and less vibrant. So why does this happen, and is there anything you can do about it? The reason alcohol marker art fades has to do with what the colors in the markers are made of. Alcohol markers contain dye, and all dyes will fade over time. It's just the nature of dyes due to their soluble molecular structure. Dyes are less stable than pigments, for example, which are insoluble and last longer. For example, oil paints contain pigments, and that's one of the reasons why oil paintings can last for centuries. And with the right care, oil paintings can still look as vibrant as the day they were painted. On the other hand, the marker art that you make today will definitely look a lot different if you fast forward to a century from now. This brings us to the concept of lightfastness, which is an important term to know when talking about art materials and how long they last. Lightfastness describes how resistant a dye or pigment is when exposed to light. Dyes have poor light fastness, so they fade quickly, while overall, pigments tend to have much better light fastness, making them way more resistant to fading. Another term you'll hear is fugitive, which refers to colors that fade more quickly than colors that are light fast. Some colors are more fugitive than others, even within the same brand, so that means that different colors fade at different rates. For example, my favorite Copic violet, V04, often lightens and fades within a matter of weeks. I've also observed that blues, greens, violets, red violets, and blue violets tend to fade more quickly than other colors, like yellows, oranges, and browns. So the rate at which your alcohol marker art fades will also depend on the specific colors that you use. And then there's the word permanent. It's important to know that even when a marker is labeled permanent, that doesn't mean the color will last forever. That just means that it won't easily wash off with water. It has nothing to do with light fastness. So now you understand that the more light fast your colors are, the better longevity you'll get from your artworks. And you've also learned that the colors in alcohol markers are fugitive. This means that even under the best conditions, your marker art will still fade over time. But does it even matter? Some people are devastated when they find out that alcohol marker art fades, especially when they've created commissions for people using alcohol markers, and they feel terrible to learn that the artwork will not look the same as it did originally. But on the other hand, there are also lots of people who are actually not that concerned about it. Like, if you only create art for yourself, or if you sell reproductions, then you might not mind what happens to the original. I'd love to know what you think. How do you feel about it, knowing that your alcohol marker art will eventually fade? Does it bother you, or are you fine with it? Let me know in the comments. One reason people might not think it's a big deal is when you have drawings that you created 5, 10, or even 20 years ago, and you could swear they look exactly the same today. Maybe you tucked your art away in a dark drawer all that time, or in a sketchbook, in which case it is possible the colors didn't fade much. But even 20 years is a very short window of time compared to other art media that can last for centuries. So whether or not this matters is definitely up to you, and it all depends on how long you want your art to last. Now, if you do find all of this to be upsetting, Before you throw away all of your alcohol markers in a fit of despair, let's talk about why you should keep using them and what you can do to help your marker art last as long as possible, including the one method that can make your artwork last forever. If you already own hundreds of markers and you adore using them, there's no need to stop. As you know, alcohol markers are super fun to work with. The colors are vibrant, they blend well, they're portable and easy to use, and you don't have any prep or cleanup. Alcohol markers offer a quick way to sketch out an idea, relax by coloring, or express your creative vision. So if you love alcohol markers, let's focus on how you can make the colors in your marker art last as long as possible. Honestly, the best way to preserve your original colors is that once you finish your artwork, you want to immediately place it into an archival box and never look at it ever again. But that's totally ridiculous, so don't do that. You worked hard on your art and you should get to enjoy it. So the most important thing to make your art last as long as possible is to be aware of the environmental factors that can accelerate fading. We're talking about light, humidity, temperature, pollutants, and even the surface you worked on. The good news is that you can take steps to ward off these issues as long as possible and even extend the life of your alcohol marker art by slowing down the rate of fading. Here's how. Use high-quality paper that is acid-free. My current favorites are Expressit Blending Card, Strathmore Smooth Bristol Paper, Copic Paper, and a Hoohoo Bleed-Proof Marker Paper. I'll post links to them below. But there are many brands out there to choose from, so I encourage you to experiment to see which paper you like best. Just be sure it's labeled as acid-free. Some artists like to seal their finished marker art with a UV protectant spray varnish. This adds a protective barrier that will block most UV rays from getting through. While it can help your colors stay true for a while longer, it doesn't change the fact that all dyes will fade over time. Plus, the UV-resistant properties of the spray varnish will also diminish over time. I usually don't spray varnish my marker drawings, so if it's something you're interested in, I encourage you to do some research first to find the best varnish for your needs. If you want to display your artwork, it's a good idea to hang it behind UV-resistant glass or plexiglass. This will also block most UV rays from getting through to your artwork, but again, it doesn't change the fact that eventually the dye will fade. It can help your art last a while longer though. Be sure to hang your alcohol marker art in a place that's not in direct light, especially sunlight, but be aware that even indirect indoor lighting can slowly affect your artwork. Also be sure to hang your art away from AC vents and heaters. Try to avoid kitchens and bathrooms. Both of these areas in your home experience a lot of fluctuations in heat and humidity, both of which can prematurely fade your artwork. Remember how I joked about stuffing your finished art into an archival box? Well, that is actually a really good option, especially if you have a lot of alcohol marker art and you can't possibly display it all around your house at the same time. I purchased this one from Blick. It's almost 2 inches tall, so it can hold hundreds of drawings, and it keeps them safe from all these environmental factors that we've been talking about. Now, if you want your marker art to last forever, there is one thing you can do, and that is to scan or photograph it. So yeah, technically, the artwork itself will still fade, but if you have a high-quality scan or photo, then the artwork will essentially last forever, and you can also sell it as prints, stickers, and whatever else you can think of. By scanning or photographing your art, it takes on a life of its own, beyond the piece of paper that you drew it on, and that way, you never have to worry about the colors fading. I always scan my art because it's easier to get a flat, accurate reproduction that way. On the other hand, when photographing your art, you have to be aware of things like light and shadows, as well as reflections and distortions, so I personally find scanning to be so much simpler in comparison. I always scan at least 300 dpi, though sometimes I do go up to 1200 dpi if I think I might want to enlarge the artwork for any reason. Once you scan your art, you'll want to use image editing software to make adjustments to the contrast and saturation to make it look just like the original artwork. It's a good idea to scan your art right away after finishing it, before the colors start fading. If you wait even a few months before you scan, some of the colors might not look accurate anymore. And always be sure to back up your digital files so you have more than one copy. So if you save the scan onto your laptop, it's a good idea to upload it to the cloud and onto an external hard drive. Now, what about selling your alcohol marker art? I don't recommend selling your original marker art unless the collector knows that fading will occur over time. If someone's interested in purchasing your alcohol marker art, it's best to be honest and upfront right from the start, so there are no unpleasant surprises later when the vibrant colors fade or change. That way, your collector can make an informed decision about whether to buy it or not. Selling prints of your marker art instead of the original is an excellent alternative because high-quality scans or photos can look just as good as the original. If you really want to sell your original art, then you should consider using a different medium than markers. You could try watercolors or ink, but if you prefer the marker format, you could try using pigment-based markers, like Winsor & Newton Pro Marker watercolor markers or Faber-Castell Pitt markers, both of which contain pigment instead of dye. In this video, we focused on how alcohol markers fade, but it's worth noting that most water-based markers will fade as well. And in general, water-based markers fade even more quickly than alcohol markers, so they're not really a suitable substitute if you want to create long-lasting art, unless they contain pigments like the brands I just mentioned. But you should also be aware that not all pigments are created equal. Cheaper art supplies will contain cheaper pigments, which won't last as long as the more expensive options. In some cases, cheap pigments can fade just as quickly as dyes. So you have to be careful. And just be aware that if an art supply is truly Lightfast, the manufacturer will almost always have information on their website to prove it, because they know that Lightfastness is a huge selling point that helps differentiate their products from the competition. Now, back to alcohol marker alternatives. The other type of pigmented markers you could try are paint markers that contain actual acrylic paint, like Posca or Liquitex. But those markers are really different than alcohol markers or water-based markers, so using them is a whole different process. But if you like the convenient form factor of markers, then they might be worth trying. You can even get them with brush tips. Paint markers are becoming more and more popular these days as more brands are offering them, especially at cheap price points. Another suggestion is that you could experiment with colored pencils. Even though they're a dry media, colored pencils are convenient, familiar, and easy to use. And the colors are vibrant, just like markers. And if you use solvents with your colored pencils, you can even create the kinds of smooth blends you're used to creating with markers. You could also try using watercolor pencils, which can be dissolved and blended with water. If you find that all of this talk about alcohol markers fading makes you really sad, then it might be time for you to explore one of these different media. Or you could just change your mindset and remember that marker art was never meant to last forever. It's very much a present moment medium. So if you just want to relax and make art and you love using markers, then embrace them for what they are. Enjoy the process every step of the way. Get into that creative flow and don't worry about the future. Just scan or photograph your art when you're done and move on to the next drawing. The important thing is that you have fun and find the whole process fulfilling and enriching. If you're a beginner to alcohol markers and want to learn more about how to use them, check out my ultimate guide to using alcohol markers, where I dive deep into everything you need to know to go from beginner to advanced. You can also watch a marker drawing come to life from start to finish in this video, where I show you how I created this cute wizard cat. See you there!